Hey, what's up? Welcome to The Rational Live. It is February 28th, 2020, and it's going to be kind of a laid-back show today, to be quite honest with you. I collected a bunch of stories that I'll discuss, but nothing too substantial. And then, of course, I'll take super chats throughout the entire stream. But tomorrow I'm streaming the South Carolina primary. So the results are supposed to come in at our polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday, tomorrow. I'm going to be streaming it on Twitch because I want to be watching MSNBC and CNN's coverage, and I can do that on Twitch. I can't do that on YouTube. So join me on Twitch. The link is in the description box below. It's twitch.tv/The Rational National. Just follow, and you'll be notified when I go live. So that's going to be fun. But in today's show, let's see. So I have a lot of random stuff. As you see in the thumbnail, I'm going to talk about the Bolivia election and how it was not, in fact, it was not. What I'm trying to say here. It was, in fact, the result that it was supposed to be, in terms of Evo Morales actually did win, and there was no inconsistencies in the results. I'll get to that. So the election was fair there. Coronavirus. People have stopped buying Corona beer because they think it has something to do with the coronavirus. Incredible. And a lot of Bernie stuff coming up. I don't know. I'm kind of all over the place today. A lot of polling, lots of polls and polls of the week. Huge, massive breakdown. A lot to talk about when it comes to South Carolina. Here's the thing with South Carolina. I'll do more of a, I guess, preview tomorrow during the stream. But basically, Joe Biden is most likely going to win. And he could win by 20 points. So recent polling, the majority of recent polling shows Joe Biden with a massive lead, though some of those polls are a little questionable as they clearly favor much older voters. But with that said, the South Carolina Democratic voting base does appear to be largely older anyways. So maybe the polling's accurate in that sense. But then there are other polls that show Bernie within like 4 or 5 points of Biden. Let's just err on the side that he is going to lose badly. So I think it's better to go into it thinking that Bernie's going to lose this by 20 points. And if he does any better, then good. But looking forward to Super Tuesday, I think that's where the focus really should be. But obviously, if you're in South Carolina or if you're, phone bank, knock on doors, make sure you get people out. There's still a chance. Like, if you think back to 2016, Bernie Sanders was down in polling in Michigan by 20 points. And he came back and defeated Hillary Clinton. So that could happen again if the polling is that off, though it's rare that it is that off. So I don't want to get people's hopes up, but just understand that South Carolina isn't everything. Bernie's already won 3 states. So don't freak out if South Carolina doesn't work out well. What else? Like the stream, do that. That's apparently a good thing. And also, I got to find a way to not overlap these two things. But therationalnational.com/join. That's the Patreon page, and help support the show. All right. I just saw this randomly on Twitter. I haven't watched it yet, but this guy makes me laugh. Adam Green. He is the co-founder, I believe, of Bold Progressives, or the PCCC. Let's watch. They've endorsed Elizabeth Warren, and if you haven't been on Twitter, then good for you, because this guy just been on a tear in terms of trolling Sanders supporters. So Owen Higgins here tweets out, watching Adam Green realize in real time he's backed the wrong horse and will not, in fact, have a White House job is pretty delightful. So let's watch this exchange. I have not seen this, so I really don't know what to expect.
The idea that the superdelegates would not vote for Sanders if the idea that the superdelegates would not vote for Sanders if he or not cast their ballots for Sanders if he walked in without a majority.
Understood. Yeah. So look, Elizabeth Warren is not focused on this. It does seem like Bernie Sanders is a little bit focused on this. And in the NBC debate in Vegas, the one thing he said was that he doesn't think superdelegates should be deciding this. But, that's after he tried to organize the superdelegates in 2016 to his advantage. But it's also, what he didn't say was that he has any objection to the elected delegates finding majority support if nobody has a majority entering the convention. Why did he not object to that? Because that's what conventions are, and that's what the democratic process is. It would actually be anti-democratic to dismiss the duly elected delegates. So honestly, I think that all the hubbub about superdelegates is beside the point.
The idea.
Oh my goodness. First of all, the amount of misinformation in this is just hilarious. But it's also, I guess let's get to some of the misinformation. Bernie Sanders in 2016, his whole superdelegate play was, first of all, against Hillary Clinton. Like, it's not like Bernie was up against Elizabeth Warren in 2016. He was fighting somebody who was the opposite of him on issues. So it made total sense for him to fight as much as he could her in that race. But on top of that, Bernie's play for superdelegates was focused on states that he won in terms of votes, in terms of pledged delegates. So he always used the example, for example, in Colorado. In Colorado, Bernie Sanders won big, but the superdelegates in Colorado were with Hillary Clinton. So Bernie was making the argument, I think the correct argument, that superdelegates should support the candidate that actually won their state. That was Bernie's argument in 2016. Here, the Elizabeth Warren argument is, well, we're not going to win any states. We're barely going to win any delegates, but we are the unity candidate somehow, even though we're not getting any votes. Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's completely absurd. I really do not understand why Elizabeth Warren is still in this race. Right now, as I'm going to get to when it comes to polls, she is down in her own state to Bernie Sanders. Bernie continues to increase his lead in Massachusetts, while Elizabeth Warren is in second place and she's falling. If she loses her own state, which is very likely on Super Tuesday, it's not going to look good on her the day that she loses, and also going into the future. The fact that she lost her own state really shows that she has weakness there in her own state and could, in fact, maybe face a primary challenger that could defeat her. Like, imagine the situation was reversed, where Bernie Sanders lost the first 3 states, Elizabeth Warren in this imaginary land wins the first 3 states, and Sanders is also losing Vermont in polling to Elizabeth Warren. Sanders would drop out and back her. But here, Elizabeth Warren continues to fight. I just don't get it at all. And the longer she stays in this race and continues smearing Sanders and his supporters, the more support she's losing herself. Not even just in her state, but at large when it comes to the Democratic base. It's really crazy that she's still in this race because she has no shot at the nomination unless she somehow steals it. Because she's... Other parts of... I'm not sure if it was this interview, but I saw a different clip where Adam Green was talking about basically avoiding the fact that Elizabeth Warren might not win any states and still trying to argue that she should be the nominee, even if she doesn't win a single state. These people are out in cuckoo land. Like, there's no defending any of this. And again, as Owen Higgins points out, it's really because of their own jobs. I mean, Adam Green wants a job in the White House, and he backed the wrong candidate, and he's sticking with it. Just incredible. All right. Let me get to something. Actually, I have a lot of just like I think my first 3 clips or stories are just kind of random things. So I got this one I want to share with y'all. I really enjoyed this video, as you're going to see. So I came across this video. This is in South Carolina. This was posted by Kendrick Sampson. He's a Bernie supporter. And this is just a random supporter of Bernie Sanders. And you see the energy and enthusiasm that he has for him. And I want to share this because I really enjoyed watching this.
Bernie already won. We believe in it. We got faith in it. And he gonna do it. Donald Trump got to go. Bernie gonna do it. We go. Listen here. We gonna get back what we got taken from us.
That's what I'm talking about.
Bernie gonna do it. Absolutely.
Bernie gonna do it. Bernie gonna do it.
Anybody can beat him. Gonna be Bernie.
Absolutely.
Anybody can beat him. It's gonna be Bernie.
College people.
That's right.
Jobs, prisons,
That's right. Housing.
all that just messing with us. People getting in jail 30 years, 20, 15 for drugs. Bernie said, let them out. That's $9. That rapists and all that stuff. Bernie, I need to get Bernie. Anybody can beat Donald Trump, gonna be Bernie. Who can beat him toe to toe? That help the people gonna take us to another level. Gonna have to be Bernie.
Who that? Yeah.
Bernie.
That's Bernie, yeah.
Bernie.
Yeah.
What other candidate has this kind of energy behind them? Are you going to find a Joe Biden supporter like this? This has this much excitement for Joe Biden, or Amy Klobuchar, or Elizabeth Warren, or Pete Buttigieg, or Bloomberg for that matter? I mean, nobody has this kind of energy and support. And this is just one person, but you've seen the crowds, you've seen the enthusiasm. Just people understand that Bernie Sanders is actually fighting for them because he has fought for the average person his entire career. And the other candidates in the race have all been two-faced. At one point or another, they have said the wrong thing, supported the wrong thing, been on the wrong side of issues. I mean, and recently as well. So, I mean, we always talk about Joe Biden and his history. He has a horrible history. But even someone like Elizabeth Warren backing Trump's increase in the military budget. Like, that's a point. I mean, when you see how often Elizabeth Warren smears Bernie Sanders and his campaign, the fact that Bernie hasn't brought up the obvious policy difference that Elizabeth Warren supported Trump's military budget and he didn't. I mean, it really shows you how hands-off Bernie has been on a lot of the candidates on stage, and especially on Elizabeth Warren. But this kind of enthusiasm you're not going to find anywhere else. And I want to share this clip. This is from Nomi Key, who was on my show this week. Check out our interview. We discussed DNC, the chance that Bernie has at winning the nomination, what it's like to be on cable news, a lot of stuff. But she had a great message that somebody clipped out on Twitter. Let me share this. So, Berkney Sanders, Peter New Turkeys shares out. Thank you, Nomiki Konst, for saying this. Ultimately, we need to ignore the noise and stay focused because we are winning. So, Nomiki has a great, quick message here.
My message to you would be ignore the New York Times stories. They're just looking for articles. They're looking for drama. Ignore the cable news. They just want drama because it's ratings. And think about how Bernie Sanders has built the only multiracial, multi-generational, working class movement that can defeat Trump. My message to you.
There you go. Focus. Focus. Very important, especially going into South Carolina, as I was discussing earlier. There's a really good chance Bernie might lose South Carolina by 20 points, but you can't let that discourage you because of it's one state. Like Bernie's won the first 3 states. Super Tuesday is looking really good. So if he loses South Carolina and by a large margin, don't worry about it. It's fine. Stay focused. And cable news is going to try, if Biden wins South Carolina, which he likely will, they're going to make it into a big story. Oh, Joe Biden's back. Well, we can ignore the first 3 states, completely ignore the fact that Bernie won Nevada by like 30 points. Let's ignore all that information. Joe Biden back in the race now that he won South Carolina. You know they're going to do that because, of course, they're going to do that. Anytime Bernie wins, it's like, but this. Anytime someone else has like one good data point, oh my God, that's the entire race right here. Joe Biden, yes, he'll be the nominee. You know they're going to do that. So ignore the noise. Don't let that get you down. Focus on the movement. Focus on informing people. Focus on phone banking, door knocking, donating, talking to friends and family. Whatever you can do to increase awareness about what the Sanders campaign is fighting for, who they're fighting for. That's where your focus should be. All right. I forgot to mention, of course, Super Chats. I'm taking Super Chats, as I always do. I think I heard one come in, so let me just bring up the panel. The panel of questions. Also, something else I may do today that I've never done is take a break in the middle of the stream for like a couple minutes, which is, it's so weird that I never thought about doing that. Because I would after every stream, which is usually like 2.5 hours, I'm exhausted, and for some reason I just realized yesterday that, oh, wait a second, everybody else that does a live stream, they take breaks. There's like, couple minute breaks after 30 minutes or after an hour, they take a break. I don't take breaks. I just go straight through for 2.5 hours. That's crazy. So I may take a break today, which will keep me energized for the second half of the stream. But let me bring up a super chat here. Zach Finley sends a super chat in saying, David, favorite way to end my week. Thank you, Zach. Radzoso says, David, would you do a video on Bernie's impact on down ballot candidates? Thank you. It would all be speculation, but because I think Bernie will absolutely increase voter turnout, bring out a lot of independents, a lot of young people, a lot of typical non-voters, a lot of working class voters, it's only going to help down ballot races. This idea that Bernie would somehow hurt the Democrats' chances to keep the House or win the Senate is just completely absurd. It's not based in any data point whatsoever. Bernie brings out people that don't normally vote. So the blue no matter who voters that voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, they will come out for the Democratic nominee regardless of who it is in 2020. But you have to get new people out if you actually want to win big. And the only candidate doing that, the only candidate actually bringing new people out is Bernie Sanders. So I don't even know the argument otherwise, because if there is one, it doesn't make any sense. There is no actual data to back up an opposite argument. One more super chat here. Anthony P says you should do video call Bernie on your show. You have put in a lot of work for us. You should do video call Bernie. You mean have Bernie on my show? Of course, the door is always open for Bernie Sanders. But I think he's kind of busy right now trying to win a nomination. All right. Let me get to some real stories now, I think. Oh, no, I got one more. One more fun clip. It's going to be half the stream, just sharing fun clips. But this one's also good. This is actually really awesome. I love when Bernie Sanders does his stand-up comedy routine because this is very relatable. And you can always hear the audience reaction to Bernie when he goes on tangents like this. So this is Bernie Sanders basically making fun of billionaires crying about taxes. So let me show you this clip.
But they go to rich people's homes and they sit down and they hear all of the problems that the billionaires have. Oh, my God. And some of these guys are on TV, they're literally crying about what Bernie said. Oh, wealth, I'm down to my last $6 billion. And Bernie wants to tax me. Oh, my God, how much can a human being take? That's literally true. They're really flabbergasted because they have not a clue what goes on in the real world. It's not that these are evil people. They're ignorant. They don't know what goes on in the real world.
That's also very charitable for him to say that. For him to just say it's just ignorance. I largely agree with him, but to be able to amass that kind of wealth, you also kind of got to be a bit of a sociopath. So I do think there is some just, I guess you can call it willful ignorance, but I think there's also some awareness that, yeah, they are living large while a lot of people are living on the street. And a lot of the times they think it's because they work so hard, when in reality, a lot of it is so much luck. Being born into the right family, going to the right schools, like all of that is really like being born into the right zip code. All of it is just complete luck in terms of where you are born and the family you're born into and the people you're surrounded with.
They don't know that half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't know that in South Carolina, I visited a home, and I'm sure there are a lot more than one home where there is no clean drinking water. They don't know that millions of families in America can't find decent quality child care. They don't know that there are workers in this room trying to make it on 10, 11 bucks an hour. They don't know that half of the older workers in this country who are reaching the end of their work life have nothing in the bank for retirement. They don't know that there are people in this room, in this community, in my own state, who are 70, 80 years of age, cannot live on $12,000, $13,000 a year Social Security benefits. They don't know that there are 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight, including 30,000 veterans. That is not the world that they understand. So what we are doing, instead of going to rich people's homes to say, oh, please give me some money, I want to hear all about your billionaire problems, we spend our time with working people.
There you go. Great stuff. All right, let me just get a couple more super chats before we go to the first story of the day. I guess you could probably say that. Zach Finley's back saying, this is in support of your breaks. Unionize and protect yourself from our demands. You know this business is a micro-tyranny. Take back your rights. And they leave a little face at the end to say they're joking. But no, you're right. Gotta take my breaks. Dustin Harrell says, did you see George Washington Graduate School of Political Management is predicting Bernie will win South Carolina? Kirk Brown _AIM on Twitter for the source. Okay. I'm actually kind of curious what their argument is. Okay, let me share this. Contrary to pollsters, George Washington University Graduate School of Political Management says Bernie Sanders will win South Carolina Democratic presidential primary. Prediction is based on models that consider Twitter mentions, cash on hand, and endorsements. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you have to look, if they're right, then they have a new model for predicting races. I would like to see what their predictions are, if they have predictions on their previous races, in the other primaries, and if they were correct or not. But that does seem like, look at this one. This was a couple days ago. This is not a good one. This is probably the worst one. Other polls don't look this bad, but here you have Biden, 35, Steyer 17, Sanders 13 in South Carolina. Like, that would be the worst result if Sanders doesn't even hit 15%. And it could happen again. Don't freak out if that happens. Super Tuesday is where the focus should be if that happens. But we will have to see. We'll have to see. All right, I'll take more super chats afterwards. Let me get to this first story. All right. So Michael Bloomberg is right now in the process of buying superdelegates. And yes, I mean buying almost literally. So let me show you this story from The Intercept. This is where this information comes from. Bloomberg has hired the vice chairs of the Texas and California Democratic parties. So as they report here, this reporting done by Akila Lacey. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg has hired 2 state Democratic Party vice chairs in Super Tuesday states with 2 of the top 3 highest number of pledged delegates. Bloomberg hired Texas Democratic Party Vice Chair Carla Braley as a senior advisor to his campaign in December, and he hired California State Democratic Party Vice Chair Alexandra Rooker for a similar role in January. Both Bailey and Rooker are superdelegates who will likely vote for the Democratic presidential nominee at the party's national convention this summer. Hiring the leadership of a state party doesn't appear to break any campaign laws, but it indicates Bloomberg's intent to effectively purchase political support, said Brendan Fisher, the federal reform program director at the Campaign Legal Center. Quote, "This does seem to fit a long-standing pattern of Bloomberg using his billions to help generate support among political elites," he said. So there's more reporting here. I'm not going to read all of it, but this is what Michael Bloomberg is trying to do. His bet is on the second ballot. So if no candidate reaches a majority of pledged delegates during this primary race, then it will go to a second ballot where then superdelegates can vote and basically potentially overturn the will of the people. So let's go back to 2008 for a second. In 2008, Hillary Clinton had the majority of superdelegates on her side at the beginning of the primary process. But then as Obama was winning states, and it was clear that he was going to overtake, and he overtook Hillary Clinton in pledged delegates, the superdelegates largely went over and supported Barack Obama, because that's how democracy should operate. The superdelegates should move based on the will of the people. It is not something that should overturn the will of the people. And now, in 2020, superdelegates no longer, thankfully, have a position on the first ballot, but on the second ballot, they can still basically put their thumb on the scale. Now, if they care about democracy and care about the future of the Democratic Party, they will back the candidate that has the most votes during the primary process. So that appears like it'll be Bernie Sanders, because no other candidate right now has the kind of energy and support in states across the country the way Bernie Sanders does. But if superdelegates come in and back, let's say, Michael Bloomberg, and several of those happen to be purchased by Michael Bloomberg, how can you possibly, how could anybody, how could I argue for you to support Michael Bloomberg in the fall when he stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders? How would I be able to argue that in good faith? I wouldn't be able to argue that. So I'm not sure if they really understand, if the DNC and Tom Perez really understand what's at stake here, that if they steal the nomination away from the candidate that has the most delegates, regardless of its majority or a plurality of delegates, whoever goes to the convention with the most delegates should be the nominee, because that is who the voters have decided that they want to be as the nominee. But if the superdelegates or there's some other shenanigans going on that overturns the will of the people for somebody else, I don't care if it's Jesus Christ himself that gets nominated as the Democratic nominee. You cannot support that, because that would be, you would essentially be supporting a corrupt process. You would be supporting authoritarianism. You'd be supporting overturning the will of the people to the party elites. And there's no way I can get behind that. Now, obviously, it'd be up to you if that happened. Like, you know, no one's forcing your hand to say don't vote for the Democratic nominee. But if they stole the nominee from the person that actually won, they're going to, I mean, regardless of, say Bernie Sanders is like, oh, settle down, guys, I support the Democratic nominee, even though they stole it from me, or AOC comes out and does the same thing. Regardless of what these leaders do, regardless of what Bernie says, regardless of what AOC says, regardless of what I say, the majority of voters of Bernie's base are going to be pissed off, and they are not going to support the nominee that the elites chose. So I hope that they understand that they would be destroying their party. And look, there's a potential here that Democratic Party elites may prefer the party be destroyed than have Bernie Sanders lead it. And that's what they're going to be faced with. And it would be such a complete mess. So let's hope it doesn't get down that path. Let's hope Bernie just wins outright in terms of a majority of delegates. But it's unclear right now what's going to happen. And moves like this, literally buying superdelegates, is just, the fact that this is legal is completely disgusting. Okay, let me get more super chats here. Bernie Argillatine says, check out Pink Trip's latest 2020 debate supercut. I don't know who that is. But for people that are reading, check it out. Not Provided says, would you say we have the second Red Scare? I don't know. I don't think we need to get it too into needing to label things. Just focus on what's actually in front of us, and do what we can to ensure that people's voices are the ones that come out on top. Galby Alvarez says, hi, David. My boyfriend is Republican, but we're both voting for Bernie in the primary. Me, because I'm a stand, and him because every other Dem candidate is god awful and feels Bernie is genuine and really deserves it. That's pretty dope. Bernie does have that cross appeal because of his authenticity. That's a lot of it. A lot of Republicans, even if they're brainwashed into thinking, oh, Bernie, he's too left wing, a lot of them still respect him because he's honest about what he stands for and has always been consistent in his positions. And that does appeal to people broadly, regardless of ideology. Gabby Alvarez says he's still voting for Trump in the general, but I have time to work on that. I got to hand it to, I don't know how I could be in a relationship with somebody that is that diametrically opposed to my worldview. You guys make it work. Good for you. Maybe politics doesn't really have that much of a bearing on your life, but Jesus, if I was, I wouldn't be able to be with someone who was a Trump supporter. It would be nuts. I don't know how I would have conversations with that person. Just like, what would I relate with them on? It doesn't make any sense to me. But everybody obviously has their own, they put value in different things. Cody says, if the DNC steals the election from Bernie, they completely lose young voters and won't recover for decades, if ever. I could see a rise in the DSA. Yep, that's correct. I never know how to say your name. The Beck Minator, is that right? Hey again, David. It looks like Amy Klobuchar might win Minnesota. If that happens, would she be the John Kasich of this primary? Maybe. But Bernie's also doing well in Minnesota. Bernie could end up defeating Klobuchar and Warren in their respective states. And if that happens, I don't know what argument that Klobuchar and Warren would have to stay in the race. Andrew Grew says if the Dems steal this, they will lose at least 2 generations of voters and end up a permanent minority party with no power. Yep. I think you're right. Okay. Let me get to whatever the next story is. Establishment Democrats begin to bend the knee. That is the next story. All right. So it appears now that the Democratic Party establishment is at least getting prepared to potentially bend the knee to Bernie Sanders were he to become the nominee. So I got several examples of that here. Let me first go to this clip from Morning Joe, posted by Case Study QB, that I guess kind of speaks for itself. Watch how each of these Democratic leaders respond to the idea of Bernie winning the nomination.
Don't you, as a leader, feel a desire to jump in and do whatever you can to avoid losing the House?
We're not going to lose the House. We're going to be united by whoever is the candidate for president. But we are taking responsibility for winning the House, and we're not assuming anything. But we feel very confident.
But wouldn't a non-Bernie candidate make your job easier of keeping the House?
Whoever the nominee is, we will embrace enthusiastically.
Do you agree with the premise that Bernie Sanders' nomination makes it harder to hold the House?
I think we're going to hold the House.
The judge said that if Bernie Sanders went the top of the ticket, we could expect a Speaker Kevin McCarthy in 2020.
I look forward to renominating Speaker Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi on the floor of the United States House of Representatives in January of 2021. And making it clear that House Democrats are still down with NDP.
Democratic House leadership dismissing some people's concerns that Senator Bernie Sanders at the top of the Democratic ticket could hurt congressional Democrats down the ballot.
All right, so there you saw Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Hakeem Jeffries, all Democratic leaders in the House, basically avoiding the question about would Bernie hurt the Democratic Party. Now, if they were actively focused on defeating him, then they would say yes. They would, or at least somehow indicate that they are worried if Bernie Sanders is the nominee. But they're not doing that. So they're at least beginning to acknowledge that they will support Bernie Sanders if he were to win the nomination. Now, before I get to the next piece of this, though, these questions from the journalists, they're just so stunningly ignorant because they keep setting up these questions with no actual information behind them. Sanders, how many times do I have to talk about how Sanders is the most electable candidate because he brings out new voters? About 40% of the country that doesn't normally vote, he brings those people out, young people, independents, working class voters. The blue, no matter who voters that voted in 2016 are going to vote for the Democratic nominee regardless. So you have to reach people that don't normally vote, and only Bernie Sanders does that. This idea that he would hurt down ballot races is completely ridiculous. He would not hurt down ballot races. He would only help them because he would bring out more people to vote. But the journalists are just such garbage. Such garbage. But let me show you another piece here. Hillary Clinton says she'll support Democratic nominee even if it's Sanders. So earlier this year, Hillary Clinton was taking open shots at Bernie Sanders. It only helped him. Bernie's polls rose even more, or his numbers in the polls rose even more. He was fundraising off of these comments. So it didn't, the idea that, it really is kind of incredible that Hillary Clinton thought that her words meant anything, that she thought, oh, if I come out against Bernie, it's really going to hurt his chances. Nope. Nobody gives an F about you at all. You're garbage. All you did was help him. Thank you so much, Hillary Clinton. But even she's saying here, yes, I'll support Sanders. And even the New York Times is allowing opinion pieces like this to go out. Bernie Sanders can beat Trump. Here's the math. The New York Times. And Mehdi Hassan saying here, again, nothing's guaranteed and no victory can easily be predicted. But still, fascinating, overlooked data. And all the data is a lot of the stuff that I mention all the time. Talking about swing states, talking about poll numbers, talking about where Bernie's appeal is. A lot of the stuff that should be obvious and should be reported consistently, but is the kind of information that cable news often purposely overlooks because, again, it makes the case for Bernie Sanders, and they don't want to make his case because these are massive media companies that benefit from the status quo. All right, next story. Actually, let me get some chats up in here. I think I read this, but I'm not positive. Andrew Grew says, if the Dems steal this, they will lose at least 2 generations of voters and end up a permanent minority party with no power. I think I read that, but yes, I agree. Oceans says the level of pandemonium that would happen if Bernie got screwed would be massive. Kyle Kulinski even said he and people would march on the DNC. Yeah, I saw him say that, and that would be the correct response. I agree with that. LA Tortilla Soup says, sorry if you've been asked this before, but I'm pretty new to your channel. What got you so interested in U.S. politics? I just think it's funny. My go-to for U.S. political news is a Canadian. Thanks. I have talked about this a lot. It's just what I'm into. It was kind of my entry into politics, was American politics. I grew up watching like The Daily Show and Colbert, and then The Young Turks. And it was kind of my entry point into politics. And it got me involved in politics in my own country, where I ran as a Green Party candidate. So there are countless Canadians that have covered American politics. Peter Jennings, who's not alive anymore, but he was a big anchor in the U.S. Naomi Klein. There's others that I can't think of right now, but Canadians cover American politics quite often. There's quite a few of us. The Beck-inator. I think I say your name different every time. But the Beck says, yes, you got my name right. Oh, awesome. So it's the Beck-minator. The Beck-minator. You got my name right. Love your show as always. Thank you. Ravi says, David, get some rest. Is it true Warren got about $10 million from a super PAC? Yes. That is a story that is coming up. So we will, in fact, I think it's more than that, potentially. I'll get to that story. Bernie or Guillotine says Bernie should say at a debate the DNC wants us to use superdelegates because it thinks people are too stupid to vote. Make it real to people that they're getting played. Yeah, I think Bernie should bring up superdelegates at one of the debates, or bring up the fact that the person that has the most votes in the primary process should be the nominee, and to say otherwise would be to overturn the will of the people. He needs to put that stake in the ground now. Make it clear that if they overturn the will of the people, there will be issues. I agree with that. Josephine Pierulli says the DNC does not care if they lose. They serve the oligarchs. Their mission is to beat Bernie, even if Trump wins. I hear you. That said, there are members of the DNC, and Nomi Key will tell you this, that are pro-Bernie. Or even if they're not pro-Bernie, maybe they were Hillary in 2016, and they're perfectly fine if Bernie wins the nomination now. So it's not like it's important to separate the DNC from the people that run it, because the DNC is not just a hive mind. The DNC is run by the people that are in the DNC. So some of them are, a lot of them, we can say, are anti-Bernie, but a lot of them as well are perfectly fine with him being the nominee. So there still is that internal struggle within the Democratic Party establishment that is anti or pro Bernie Sanders, or for that matter, looking at politics through a different lens. So yes, a lot of the DNC is definitely controlled by oligarchs. But then there are members of the DNC that think that the party should be returned back to the people. So even separate from Bernie Sanders, they think that the party should be about working class people. So I wouldn't be too confident in thinking that the DNC as a whole wants to screw Bernie, but obviously a lot of the main leadership does, like Tom Perez, or Democratic Party leaders like Nancy Pelosi, I'm sure would prefer Bernie not to be the nominee, because it also means, honestly, that they'd be out of jobs. Tom Perez should not be leading if Bernie wins a nomination, Tom Perez has got to go. Nancy Pelosi cannot be the leader in the House if Bernie is the president. It's got to be somebody else. So definitely, they're keeping their own jobs. They're just worried about themselves. Let me get to the next story now. Sometimes these websites that I use have like autoplay videos, so I gotta make sure that doesn't happen when I'm speaking about this. All right. So 30% of Americans, or actually 38% of Americans, think that Corona beer has something to do with the coronavirus. This story is just ridiculous. And it's sad. But I got to share it. And it's gotten to the point where it's impacted Corona beer. Their shares have fallen since coronavirus became a thing. So let me first show you the CNN story on this. From CNN Business, the spread of the coronavirus couldn't have come at a worse time for Corona beer. Man, this is so depressing. Let me just go down to actually the main point here. 5W Public Relations said that 38% of Americans wouldn't buy Corona, quote, under any circumstances because of the outbreak. And another 14% said they wouldn't order a Corona in public. This survey encompasses polling from 737 beer drinkers in the United States. So it's a small sample size, but if it's done properly, that is embarrassing. In another survey conducted by YouGov, the firm found consumers' intent to purchase Corona fell to its lowest level in 2 years. The survey also showed that Corona's buzz score, a metric that measures favorability, has dropped significantly since the beginning of the year. Now, we got to be clear. It's not, okay, this first one, it's a little obvious that it is because of the coronavirus outbreak. But there's also other evidence to say that generally, because Corona beers is associated mostly with the summer, that Coronas don't do as well during the winter months as they do during the summer. A lot of it is just because of their advertising. Their advertising is always Corona on a beach with a lime. Like, it's a very summer-looking drink. But when you straight up ask people or when you connect the coronavirus to Corona beer, and people say they wouldn't buy a Corona under any circumstance because of the outbreak, and they wouldn't order, and 14% say they wouldn't order a Corona in public. This is just embarrassing. One more piece of this, as I was saying, shares have fallen. So just a drop. Corona makers' shares have fallen from 2020 high in the past week. Look at that. Wow. So this is really around the time coronavirus was, or is making headlines everywhere. Just massive drop in shares. And it's all because of a name. I don't know what else to add to this. it's just I don't know. It's sad, and usually I would blame the media because it's the media's job to inform people, and a lot of the time the media does not do a good job informing anybody. But you also can't really expect cable news or broadcast news to, every time they talk about the coronavirus, for them to say, by the way, this has nothing to do with Corona beer, because it should be obvious. But for a lot of people, apparently a name is a name, and that's all it takes. All right. That's a ridiculous story, but I had to share that. I just couldn't really, I couldn't believe it. But considering about 38% of the country supports Donald Trump, I guess maybe it does make a lot of sense. All right, let me get another super chat before I go to the next story. Trondine says Pelosi and establishment think Sanders will be stopped, in my opinion. Yeah, that is a potential as well. It's possible they're very they're not going to attack Sanders right now because they think he's going to be stopped anyways. So that could be a part of it. But also, if they thought he was going to be stopped, then what's stopping them from just being open and honest about their feelings? I also wonder that. I guess maybe they don't want to turn off the Sanders base, so that could be the reason. But I don't know. D-Vest says, yo, David, you got room in Canada? I'm coming. I don't. Sorry. I apologize. That was a very Canadian sorry. Sorry. No, I don't. But let's hope you all got room for me in America when Bernie wins, because then I'm coming. Got to open your doors for me. Josephine says they are not worried about Bernie because they are confident they will beat him at the convention. Another similar opinion to Trondine. Edwin Colazo says this is a modern Ross Perot scenario where both DNC and RNC work together against one game-changing candidate. Fair enough. But Ross Perot wasn't a part of either party, so it's a bit of a different scenario in that sense. The Beckmanator says, do you think if Trump bungles his handling of the coronavirus, which it looks like he might with putting Pence in charge, that it could hurt his chances for re-election? P.S. I kind of like you pronouncing my name different every time. Do I think if Trump bungles his handling of the coronavirus, that it'll hurt his chances for re-election? It could. It's funny, though. I really find like voting bases have short-term memory. Because every time, like whenever a new issue comes up, the press is always like, oh, this will hurt Trump in 2020. And people just tend to forget about it, whatever the hell it was. Like, hopefully all the stuff that's happened with Trump will come up during a general election, put all into attack ads against Trump. So it could hurt him in that sense. But people seem to be really focused on what is happening at the time. So right now, coronavirus is a big thing, but who knows what it looks like in the fall. But if Trump does bungle it, and it's this massive pandemic by the general election, then yeah, it will hurt him. But I don't want that to happen. I want Trump to lose, but I don't want Trump to lose because a bunch of people are dead over coronavirus. Hopefully those two things don't have to be connected for him to lose. I think there's enough out there for Trump to lose separate from the coronavirus. Salman Carpenter says, says the U.S. is completely unprepared for coronavirus and it will spread through poor communities like wildfire because millions cannot afford healthcare. Unfortunately, you might be right. I don't want to speculate. I don't know. It also makes me fear going to the U.S. honestly, which I had planned to do this year. So at some point, hopefully it won't impact that, but we'll see. Ricky Muni says, you think coronavirus will impact primaries turnout? Ooh, I hadn't thought about that. If it does, I think it's more likely to impact older generation voters, which typically are more supporting other candidates than supporting Sanders, just based on the data. Again, I know a lot of Bernie support is over 45, but for the most part, a lot of the energy, Bernie wins young people by 50+%, which in this race right now, having as many candidates as there are, that's crazy for him to be winning a demographic by over half. So that's where a lot of Bernie support is. I don't think they'd be afraid of coming out to support Bernie, but there's a potential. Yeah, it may impact turnout for older voters. Or at least, I shouldn't even just say older voters, but for people that are less energized about their candidate. So if you're a Bernie supporter, it's very likely you're very excited to vote for him. But if you're supporting Amy Klobuchar, are you really going to risk your life to go out and vote for Amy Klobuchar? Probably not. I'm just saying. So it could have an impact that way that in the end benefits Sanders. Okay, let me go to the next story before I take more of these. This is just a clip, but I enjoyed this clip because I didn't really cover the debate too much. So I didn't get to focus too much on the South Carolina debate, but I want to share this clip from the debate. This is Bernie's closing remarks. And I think he just makes his closing remarks often are some of the best remarks he makes during a debate, because he's really able to kind of sum everything up into why he's running and what he's fighting for and the movement that he's helped to build. And I just like what he says here, and I want to share it.
Misconception, and you're hearing it here tonight, is that the ideas I'm talking about are radical. They're not. In one form or another, they exist in countries all over the world. Healthcare is a human right. We have the necessity, the moral imperative to address the existential threat of climate change. Other countries are doing that. We don't need more people in jail, disproportionately African American, than any other country on earth. Not a radical idea. The motto, the saying that moves me the most is from Nelson Mandela. And Mandela said, everything is impossible until it happens. And that means if we have the guts to stand up to powerful special interest, we're doing phenomenally well. If we can bring working people together, black and white and Latino, we can create a nation.
All right, Senator,
where all people have a good standard of living.
Senator Warren.
So, of course, the moderator comes in there and ruins the entire moment. But that Mandela quote, he's used quite often. It's always impossible, or it always seems impossible until it's done. And this is true with any type of progress, any type of real substantial progress that requires a mass movement of people. Like, you look throughout history at all the accomplishments that we've made as a society, not even just the US, but, worldwide. It takes a movement of people, and it always seems impossible at the beginning. Like, women getting the right to vote seemed impossible. But, how could you possibly get the right to vote when you can't even vote? And they got it done. Civil rights seemed impossible. They got it done. All of these things seem impossible until they are done. But also, on top of that, it always takes a mass movement of people speaking out to get it done. Now, that doesn't mean that, we're going to create a perfect society, just like, those other, every time that we have progressed as society, it doesn't mean that society is now perfect. There are always issues, whether it's civil rights or whatever it is, where the work isn't done yet. So even if Sanders wins, the work isn't done yet. Even if you get Medicare for all, the work isn't done yet. There's always more progress to be made. But to be able to start that progress, to be able to get the ball rolling, you have to actually be engaged and get involved and understand that it requires a mass movement of people to get it done. You can't just look to leaders, even like Bernie Sanders, and think, oh, he'll get it done for me. No. If he becomes the president, it will still require a lot of work from outside the White House to be able to get the things like that he wants, like Medicare for all, that people want, passed. Because it will require pressure on your politicians, pressure on your congresspeople, on your senators. It requires political pressure through these mass movements to get anything done, to get anything passed. So I think Bernie makes a profound case here, a profound argument for why, even if right now it seems crazy that you may be able to live in a country one day that actually guarantees healthcare to everybody. It may seem crazy right now, but it's definitely possible. You can get it done. It just requires a lot of work. And basically, it requires somebody inside the White House and Bernie Sanders working with people outside the White House in this political movement to be able to get these kinds of things passed. Okay. Let me grab some of these chats. Kevin McAlpine says we've lasted so long that satire is now reality. That pretty much happened when Trump became president. Ruffs, whatever your name is, says I work at Amazon in SoCal and I wrote register to vote by mail by December 18th on the whiteboard in the break room a month or so ago, hoping I helped. I hope it did. I know a lot of Bernie support comes from Amazon workers. Like we're talking basically working class voters, teachers, Amazon warehouse workers, McDonald's workers, people that are, not making a lot of money, but are working their asses off. They're supporting Sanders. Citizen Zero says, do you watch Kim Iverson? No, I don't. IR Nerdy Girl says, I feel like Pelosi played it like that because of the progressive that she is trying to unseat her. That is trying to unseat her in her California district. Just an effort to redeem herself. Yeah, Shahid Buttar. I don't know if that's why she answered it that way. The thing with Pelosi's district, I have to imagine, is a fairly wealthy district. So, it would be friggin' awesome if Shahid Buttar took her down. But because of how wealthy her district is, who knows? Then again, we're talking, I forget how the process works, but it's a jungle primary. So I think the top two vote getters go to a second primary unless one wins a majority outright. Am I getting that correctly? So there's a potential that Pelosi may have to face Shahid Buttar head to head. But it's just super tough to overcome somebody who's that entrenched in Democratic politics, and especially someone who's living at the same time in a wealthy district the way Pelosi does. Tex U.S. progressives. Hey, David, you're awesome. Also, early voting here in Texas is way up. Us Latinos are sticking it to the establishment. Yeah, actually, I got a poll coming up in my poll breakdown. I should maybe do the polls separately now just because I can make separate stories out of them. But Texas is looking really good for Bernie. There's one poll where he's now has a considerable lead in Texas. So let's hope. I mean, man, Bernie wins Texas and California. It should be over at that point. I don't know what argument you can make against him. If you win Texas and California, the nomination should be yours. So let's hope Bernie can pull that off. Ray de los Santos. I think I said that right. The only primary that comes to mind is when the delegates took the nomination away from VP Henry Wallace and gave it to Truman behind closed doors. It's not those days anymore, and that just can't happen. Yeah, we're a lot more aware now, which is why, like, the Democratic Party can't expect to be able to screw Sanders behind closed doors and that we're not going to notice. No, we are very engaged in what is happening. We will notice, and there will be marches, and there will be problems if they steal it. Bernier Guillotine says 38% of Americans support Trump. 38% of Americans believe coronavirus comes from beer. Doubt that is coincidence. Maybe we can change it to Trump voter virus. I still hope there's got to be a little hope for some of those 38% that if we just peel them away from the cult that they're in, that maybe they can be educated on what reality is. But it's definitely a hard thing when people are in a cult like that, basically supporting their supreme leader. Neon Noir says, what is the extent of your radicalism? Could you ever entertain the idea of communism and forceful seizure of power? No. I'm generally somebody that focuses on like the fight in front of us. So to be honest with you, I haven't even given much thought to your question, and it's something I would need to sit with. But no, like, I can never support something that I couldn't see that isn't democracy. So forcefully seizing power, like, what does that look like? What does that mean? Like, context is everything, right? Because if I said yes to that, then how could I disagree with the DNC stealing power from Bernie Sanders or from the people, for that matter? So I don't know. But my focus has always been on what is the fight in front of us, which is why I'm very focused on this primary on Sanders. And in general, I'm very focused on electoral politics. But if stuff gets screwy, then I got to really refocus on activism, because how could you possibly trust the system if they just steal power away from you? All right, let me stop there. Let me get to Warren's Super PAC. Yes. Warren's Super PAC. This is quite the story. So it appears that Elizabeth Warren has the largest super PAC in the race. This is the candidate that launched their campaign saying, I'm swearing off big donor money, swearing off super PACs. I don't want any of their help. I think it's important that we have a leader fighting to ensure that there's no corporate money in politics. And now she has the biggest super PAC in the race. So let me show you some of the reporting on this. I discussed earlier in a different segment, I think a week ago now, how Warren has taken on a super PAC. At that time, it was only $1 million. Though I'm saying only $1 million. $1 million is a lot. It was a super PAC that was like 2 days old, and they already had $1 million out of nowhere. Now it's a lot more than that. So this reporting here from Shane Goldmacher of the New York Times says, new Warren Super PAC plunges $9 million into Super Tuesday states. Warren likely now has the biggest super PAC of the cycle, or at least close to it. So, details here. Today, Persist PAC, which is Warren's PAC, placed $9 million in ad buys, expanding on our investment in key Super Tuesday states. The ads will run in the following 9 markets on broadcast, cable, and digital. So, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, so a lot of California cities, and Texas, and her home state of Massachusetts. But there's more to this. The Warren Super PAC has now announced $14 plus million in spending to date. 14, no longer 9 million, 14 million. With all of the donors hidden from public view until after Super Tuesday and until March 20th, by which time about 60% of delegates will have been allocated. This is the other disgusting part of it. Super PACs, they don't have to disclose who their donors are. All the donors are hidden until March 20th. So Warren's PAC is able to spend all this money, no idea where it's coming from, helping her in these states. And by the time we do get to see some of that information, already 60% of the delegates will have been allocated. In hindsight, the fact that Warren was not asked about the Super PAC on the debate stage this week seems like a pretty important moment for her, either by the moderator or her rivals. Exactly. Like the double standard that is held. Like, if Bernie Sanders did this, if Bernie Sanders did half the things that Joe Biden has done, he would be out. They would cast him off. I did a story this week. Joe Biden lied about getting arrested trying to meet Nelson Mandela in South Africa. That's a completely manufactured story. Imagine Bernie Sanders did that. He'd be out of the race. That's it. It's all the media would be talking about. Joe Biden does it. Oh, whatever. It's Joe Biden. You know, he can lie all the time. Who cares? And Elizabeth Warren having a super PAC after having an entire campaign fighting against them. If Bernie Sanders did that, he would be asked about it. Elizabeth Warren, not one question. It's crazy. First cut on the Elizabeth Warren super PAC story. Her super PAC has now announced a $12.25 million ad buy in 10 Super Tuesday states. So that's updated from 9 million, including some of the most expensive markets: Houston, LA, San Francisco, Boston, etc. Is there more to this? One more piece. Warren hasn't just talked about super PACs on the trail a lot. She has run ads against them. Here is one screen grab of an ad about corruption that ran in Iowa. 100% grassroots funded, no super PACs. Total freaking lie. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure how much of an impact it's really going to have. I don't know if this will actually help her, because people already know who Elizabeth Warren is, and they already know that she's losing. So they may just see these commercials and be like, oh, here's this candidate that still thinks she has a chance. Like, I don't know how much this kind of support this late in the game actually is going to help, but she's still doing it. And this is after a long time of saying that she would not. And one example right here. Here's a tweet from about a year ago, just over a year ago. Elizabeth Warren saying, let's be clear. I won't take a dime of PAC money in this campaign. I won't take a single check from a federal lobbyist or billionaires who want to run a super PAC on my behalf. And I challenge every other candidate who asks for your vote in this primary to do the same. Yeah. So that's Elizabeth Warren's campaign right now. And I don't have it in front of me, but I've seen that the Bernie Sanders campaign is now sending out text messages telling people that Elizabeth Warren has spent $12 million in a super PAC, or that a super PAC for Warren has spent $12 million. And basically, they're fundraising off of the fact that Elizabeth Warren now has a super PAC. So hopefully this actually helps Sanders and hurts Warren, because I don't get her play here. Apart from just this race, the way that she's been acting this year in this race, whether it's smearing the Sanders base, smearing Bernie Sanders himself, taking on a super PAC, all of these things will hurt her politically going into the future, well past this race. I don't know what she thinks she's doing, that this will all just be wiped away cleanly once this primary race is over. I don't think it will. And I also think it's hurting her chances at being Bernie's vice president, which at one point seemed very likely. But the way she's acting now, I don't know what the argument is for her. I would definitely not choose her for vice president. But just in terms of the way that the Democratic base feels about her, she's hurting her reputation. I don't know what she's doing, and she's definitely not going to win. So all this is doing, I think, is hurting her. air is getting dry in here. All right. Let me get some more questions. Jen Pepper sends a very nice, generous super chat with a little cool icon. Thank you, Jen. Gary Mitchell says, did you see that Bernie hesitated when asked if he would take Bloomberg's money for the general election at the CNN town hall? Kind of disappointing. I didn't see that answer at all. I got to check it out. My understanding is he said no. I saw the responses that are the reaction of him saying that he would not take the money. But here's the question is so weird because Bloomberg could still pour his money into get out the vote projects, like getting people or ensuring people are registered to vote and ensuring there's no weirdness when it comes to the election process. He could still do that, but would that count as helping Bernie? I would argue that that's not helping Bernie. I mean, I guess it would help in the sense that you're helping people vote, but it's like that's where billionaires, if they want to help, that's where their money should be focused on, is getting out the vote. Like, forget backing candidates, forget running yourself. Put your money into the actual issues with the election system. Like, help fix that. And also down ballot races. Put your money into, well, then again, they're not going to choose progressive Democrats, so maybe don't do that. But like, if they were going to back the right candidates, like Jessica Cisneros in Texas against Henry Cuellar, then awesome. But can't really rely on billionaires to pick the right candidates either. So I would say focus on getting people out to vote, and if they want to put their money into that, fine. But I don't see Bernie taking Bloomberg's money. Bernie is running a grassroots campaign. That's what he said he's doing in the primary and doing it in the general. And when you're running against Trump, like, you get billions in free media. Like, everybody knows there is a Democrat and a Republican on the ticket. So you definitely do not need billionaire or corporate money in a general election when you have billions of dollars in free media. So if you need that kind of money at all, you would need it now in the primary process, not in the general. So there's no reason for him to take Bloomberg's money. All right. Next one. The Humanist Perspective says, hey, David, I'm in one of the ridings that handed Doug Ford and the OPCs their behinds last night. Felt so good. No cuts to education. Awesome. I got to be honest with you. I have not followed this at all. Been too focused on American politics. But that's awesome. Good to hear. Nick says, chances are low, but Bernie Sanders just predicted he might win South Carolina if turnout is high at a campaign event there if the voter turnout is high. Well, that's how you get people out to vote, right? Like, you want to, like, of course, there's always a chance. Yes, Bernie could definitely win if turnout is high, especially youth turnout is high, or turnout in general is high. But we don't know. But there's always a chance. As I said earlier, Bernie was down by 20 points, I believe, in Michigan against Hillary Clinton and ended up winning that state. So polling can definitely be off if turnout contradicts it. Mateus N says, do you think Corona will affect Bernie's campaign, rallies, and turnout? I don't know. It would just be pure speculation on my part. I don't think so. But, I mean, we haven't seen evidence of it affecting anything so far. So I'm not positive. All right, what is the next story here that I have? All right. Bernie Sanders has been endorsed by the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Now, what makes this endorsement special is how the endorsement was decided. So let me show you the story here from BuzzFeed News. As you see, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi has endorsed Bernie Sanders after a caucus of city residents. Mayor Chokwe Lumumba who has been courted by multiple campaigns, asked his city to determine which candidate to back ahead of the Mississippi primary. So this is what democracy is. He went to the people, and the people picked Bernie Sanders. So Chokwe Antar Lumumba, the young progressive mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, is endorsing Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign after residents of Jackson voted to endorse Sanders during a People's Caucus. Quote, I believe that an endorsement from myself should represent more than just my own personal thoughts, views, and opinions. It should be considerate of the people who are impacted by the policy, impacted by whatever relationship ensues from the individual if that relationship were to prevail. Lumumba said, explaining the choice to have a caucus. We decided that we'd have a People's Caucus, which is consistent with our normal assemblies to discuss major issues in our city. This is someone that actually gets it. This is how endorsements, all endorsements should be decided if you are an elected official. If you're an elected official, you should go to the people and from there decide who you should support. Now, I guess you could make the argument that this isn't the easiest thing to do, especially if you're talking about like every single elected official. But it's definitely the most democratic way to pick which candidate you're backing in a Democratic primary. Quoting him here, Senator Sanders rose to the top, said of the city's caucus, where representatives for Sanders, Joe Biden, Bloomberg, Warren were available to share their candidates' platforms with residents. Quote, on a personal level, Senator Sanders rises to the top for me because he has demonstrated the major consistency and I think that his policies and what he has prioritized in his campaign speaks to the issues that we're most concerned with in Mississippi. So this is just, I think this is the best way to endorse somebody. Clearly, like in this case, it worked out well for Bernie Sanders. It may not always work out this way, depending on where you are potentially caucusing. You could also argue that the way a city votes in a primary is the way that they are endorsing whatever candidate they're backing. But then that's also a way to say, look, maybe don't endorse anybody until you see who your state or your city picks as the nominee, and then put your endorsement in. So there are various ways to look at endorsements, and a lot of the time, let's be honest, endorsements like this don't really have much of an impact. We're seeing now that people appear to be a lot less connected, whether it's to their own elected officials or to like the newspapers in their cities. Like how many times have we seen, endorsements from a newspaper just have zero impact at all on a race? The New York Times, I believe it was, that backed both Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar. Like, what happened to that? Like these sorts of endorsements really don't do anything anymore. What people actually care about is who the candidates are and what they have fought for. And that really is the only thing that should matter when it comes to this. But because a lot of people have, very busy lives, they don't have time to really decide or weigh their options. They tend to look to, some of them tend to look to elected officials or, cable news or newspapers to decide for them. But as I said, I think we are seeing a lot less of that now because young voters are a lot more engaged in politics, a lot more educated on the candidates, and they don't need to look to newspaper endorsements or political endorsements to decide who to support because they can do their own research really quickly online, see who the candidate is, look back in history, see what they voted for, see what they have fought for their entire lives. And when you compare the records of all the candidates, it's pretty clear Bernie Sanders has been a leader on these issues and has fought for people his entire career. Back to super chats. Gotta find my place. Tender Lungs says America's never been a true democracy, with a bunch of 100 symbols. Thank you. Gary Mitchell says, thanks for the answer, David. That makes sense. No problem. Cool. All right. By the way, if you're coming to this stream late, tomorrow, streaming South Carolina. That's going to be a fun time. Doing that on Twitch. Link is in the description box below the video, because I'm going to be checking out cable news during my coverage, so I can't do that, unfortunately, on YouTube without there being some issues. So I'll be on Twitch covering South Carolina. Maybe Bernie will surprise us. Maybe not. But regardless, I think it's important to focus on the fact that there are many more states than just South Carolina coming up. And Bernie's looking pretty good so far. All right. Let me do Bolivia. Of course, I opened up the wrong program in the middle of a stream. All right. As I discussed back when it happened, it appears the right-wing coup in Bolivia was based on false claims of election fraud. This has now essentially been confirmed by an MIT study. So let me first remind you of what happened. Bolivian army chief urges Morales to step down. So this is back in November. Forced to step down because, there's inconsistencies with the election results. I guess that means the military's got to come in and kick you out. That's called a coup. So Evo Morales forced out because of a right-wing coup. And based on this idea, supported by the OAS, yes, it's because there's inconsistencies in the results. They stole the election. Turns out, total crap. This from Salon, MIT study, right-wing coup in Bolivia was based on false claims of election fraud. U.S. media and politicians largely backed the overthrow of leftist President Evo Morales, but the excuse was BS. So let me give you a piece of this here. A new study released by a pair of MIT researchers Thursday reveals that, contrary to claims from the U.S.-backed Organization of American States, or the OAS, there was no fraud in Bolivia's October 20th, 2019 elections, an accusation used by the OAS and others as a pretext for supporting the coup in the country that deposed President Evo Morales and replaced him with an unelected right-wing government. "Quote-unquote, good Lord," tweeted MSNBC journalist Chris Hayes. Given the fact the entire Morales government was toppled over accusations of election fraud, the OAS has a lot to answer for. Indeed, they do. And the next time they try to do something like this, there should be questions immediately about what evidence the OAS is looking at. So The Intercept's John Schwartz took a similar approach to the findings in the OAS conclusions, saying, in a surprising development, it appears that the same political forces and media that have lied about absolutely everything about Latin America for the past 100 years were lying again. Yep, of course. MIT researchers John Curiel and Jack R. Williams reviewed the OAS report on the election for the Washington Post and found that the election irregularities cited by the group were based on problematic statistical claims. The OAS report rested its claim on the assumption that these so-called irregularities gave Morales a boost in numbers that raised his results over 10% higher than any other candidate, precluding a runoff election. The researchers say they requested a response from the OAS about their findings, but received no reply. I wonder why. Curiel and Williams' study was commissioned by the Center for Economic and Policy Research. The group's co-director, Mark Weisbrot, said in a statement that the OAS has a lot of explaining to do after facilitating the coup through the faulty information. Quote, the OAS greatly misled the media and the public about what happened in Bolivia's elections and helped to foster a great deal of mistrust in the electoral process and the results, said Weisbrot. The organization's report bolstered the accusations of fraud in November 10th OAS report that precipitated the coup and the institution of hard-right legislator Jeanine Áñez as president. The ensuing unrest and threats against he and his family, as Common Dreams reported at the time, forced Morales to flee the country from Mexico. According to let me just read this one last part here. According to Carell and Williams, the data used by the OAS doesn't line up with the organization's conclusion. So this is the MIT report saying our results were straightforward. There does not seem to be a statistically significant difference in the margin before and after the halt of the preliminary vote. Instead, it is highly likely that Morales surpassed the 10 percentage point margin in the first round. There is not any statistical evidence of fraud that we can find. The trends in the preliminary count, the lack of any big jump in support for Morales after the halt, and the size of Morales' margin all appear legitimate. All in all, the OAS statistical analysis and the conclusions would appear deeply flawed. So, this was a coup based on faulty information, obviously on purpose, to steal this election from a leftist government, from an indigenous leader. And just to remind you of how successful Morales was as a leader, Anna Shields tweeted out here back when this coup was going on. During Morales' presidency, income per person in Bolivia has grown at twice the rate of the Latin American average. Poverty has been reduced by 42%, and extreme poverty has dropped by 60%. So, an incredibly successful leader in reducing poverty was forced out of power due to BS information and a media apparatus that supported that right-wing coup. So this is why people question organizations like the OAS, question whenever there is something like this going on in Latin America, because historically, looking back at it, the media is almost always wrong about like their first impressions of what is happening in these various countries. They are almost always wrong about what is going on because it is based on fake information, based on propaganda. So, unfortunately, I don't know how you fix this at this point. Morales, again, was forced to flee the country. Thankfully, he's alive and well. But, man, just totally disgusting what the media allows to happen. All right. Winding down here. Got a few more stories. Recently on MSNBC, a Democrat, Anton Gunn, former South Carolina state representative, said that elites should pick the nominee, not the voters. Now, he may have not said it in those words directly, but watch the clip because I'm pretty damn close to what his actual words are. Let me first show you who shared this. So Jordan Sheridan says on MSNBC, former advisor to Barack Obama, Anton Gunn, says the quiet part out loud. The elites of Democratic Party decide the nominee, not the voters. Let's watch his words.
And we've started to hear this more and more, and we'll probably have a better sense, obviously, Tuesday after the 1,300 delegates that are up for grabs there are spoken for. But this idea that perhaps Bernie Sanders is moving the goalposts a bit when it comes to delegates and what could go down at the convention in Milwaukee. What say you to that?
Well, I will say that Bernie is moving the goalposts. This is what people need to remember. The Democratic Party has a party. The party decides its nominee. The public doesn't really decide the nominee. The public gets to vote for President of the United States, but people who are active in the party, who participate in the party, they decide the nominee. Superdelegates are very influential in the party. Also, delegates are very influential. And just because you're a pledged delegate for Bernie Sanders or a pledged delegate for Joe Biden doesn't mean when you get to the convention floor that you'll stay a delegate for Biden or Sanders. That's a process. And so it is a process to pick the candidate who wants to be the standard bearer for the party to try to win in November. And so Bernie got to understand that process, and it's a real selective and detailed process. In 2008, the Obama campaign from the very beginning focused on the delegate process because we knew it always going to come down to the delegates, who's committed to you, who wants to be on your team at the end, and do you really feel like they can be elected?
Yeah. When they all picked Hillary Clinton, good job, guys. You did a fantastic job thinking that Hillary Clinton was the one to pick from the start in terms of superdelegates, all on her side from the start. The way MSNBC reported on that at the time, they always added the superdelegates to Hillary Clinton's delegate count, pledged delegate count, even though the superdelegates hadn't voted yet. So even if Bernie had won a state, say, wins New Hampshire, it still looked like Hillary Clinton was winning because she had the superdelegates. They showed that on screen as if they had already supported her when they had just said that they would support her. But like in 2008, they couldn't move their support over to Sanders. Or in 2008, they moved it to Barack Obama. But they couldn't move their support over to Sanders in 2016 because superdelegates hadn't voted yet. But the way that the media reported on it, it made it seem like Hillary Clinton had this insurmountable lead. They chose the perfect candidate to defeat Donald Trump, and she lost. Maybe, just maybe, you should actually trust the voters here. Because if you keep allowing party elites to choose the nominee, you're going to keep losing, and the party will be destroyed. If they overturn the nominee that has the most votes at the convention, if they try and overturn whoever has the most votes, the most pledged delegates at the convention, the party will be destroyed. And maybe they're fine with that. Maybe they'd rather destroy the party than pick Bernie Sanders as the nominee. But that's what will happen. There will be riots. There will be protests. There will be destruction. There will be a mess if they try and overturn the will of the people, because at that point, it's no longer a democracy. What is the argument for choosing somebody that has less votes than the person that has more votes? Like, what would be the actual argument? Hey, we should choose Elizabeth Warren, who won no states, has barely any delegates, but you know what? She should be the nominee, even though the voters chose somebody else. Like, what is the argument there? You're leading yourself into, 4 more years or potentially longer when it comes to Trump, of a Donald Trump presidency because you rather destroy the party than choose Sanders as the nominee. You rather choose Trump over someone that will actually fight for universal health care, will actually reject corporate money, reject billionaires, fight for free public college, fight for higher wages. You rather destroy the party than help working class people. So if that happens, at that point, that's it. The party's dead. So let's hope it doesn't come to that. All right, what do I got? Got a couple more stories, and let me take some more super chats here. Trudy says, intermission time, stretch. You know what? I think you're right. Let me read this one more super chat, and then I will take, let's say, a 2-minute break. It won't be long, but it'll give me a moment. And Tender Lungs says, I'm glad you understood my handle. All right. I will be right back, as you will see. 2-minute break. Be right back. I am back. That may have not even been 2 minutes. You know what it is? It's not even that I need to stretch, really. It's that I have 2 giant box lights in my eyes for 3 hours. And that's kind of what like it can definitely wear on my brain for sure. Especially when it comes to reading small text in front of me. But I feel a little better right now. All right, let me see if there's any more super chats before I move on to the next story. Also, I need more water. This coffee is just not doing it. All right, let me get to the next story, see what's up. What do we got left here? So this next one is, I don't know if I should cover this. It's a 5-minute video, and it's not my video, but it's an awesome video. This would more be like a show and tell kind of story. So I'm not even sure if I should really do anything on this, because I want to direct you to the person that actually made the video. This is from The Intercept. So this is here's what I'll say. Maybe I'll play a piece of this, but how am I going to share this? Let me put this link in the chat. So basically, if there are people around you in your life, whatever, friends and family, that are like, oh, but Bernie's a communist or he supports this, send them this video. Send them this video. And it becomes quite clear what Bernie's actually about. So that's the link from Spitting Back. But also, I'm sure if you go to The Intercept on YouTube or their website, may even be a better way to find this video. But let me play a little bit of this, because it's 5 minutes long, and I don't want to just play their whole video, but check it out.
Cuba made progress on education. Yes, I think, really? Really?
Bernie Sanders loves dictators and tyrants. He's a communist who has a soft spot for Fidel Castro and the Cuban government. Or at least, that's what the Republicans and some in the media, and even some of his top Democratic rivals for the presidency, want you to believe. It's bullshit, of course. You can't actually find quotes from Bernie Sanders praising dictators by name, saying they're good people or good friends of his, because they don't exist. What you can find is stuff like this.
Here he is explaining why the Cuban people didn't rise up and help the U.S. overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro.
He educated their kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
We're very opposed to the authoritarian nature of Cuba. But it's unfair to simply say everything is bad.
Just listen to what he says in that clip, which is being held up now as evidence of his unadulterated love for Castro's tyranny. We're very opposed to the authoritarian nature of Cuba. Sounds very pro-authoritarian, right? But people are also upset with the rest of the clip.
You know, when Fidel Castro came into office, you know what he did? He had a massive literacy program. Is that a bad thing? Even though Fidel Castro did it?
There's a lot of dissidents imprisoned in Cuba.
That's right, and we condemn that.
Praising the education system in Cuba, or the literacy rate there, is a big no-no according to so-called moderate Democrats. Michael Bloomberg mocked Sanders, pointing to Castro's dark legacy of violence, before adding, but sure, Bernie, let's talk about his literacy program. Mayor Pete also laid into Sanders in a tweet. We need a president who will be extremely clear in standing against regimes that violate human rights abroad. You mean, like this guy?
Every child in Cuba gets a basic education. That's a huge improvement from where it was. They should be congratulated.
They should be congratulated, said President Obama, hero to the Democratic Party. And Obama didn't, by the way, just praise Castro's record on education by accident or as a slip of the tongue. Nope, he said it more than once. In fact, he even said it in Cuba to a crowd of Cubans.
Cuba has an extraordinary resource, a system of education which values every boy and every girl.
The thing is, when it comes to dictators and praising dictators or despotic regimes, Democrats and Republicans in glass houses really shouldn't throw stones. Joe Biden's campaign, for example, slammed Bernie, saying his Castro comments were part of, quote, a larger pattern throughout his life to embrace autocratic leaders and governments across the world. Joe Biden is saying Bernie Sanders likes dictators too much. The same Joe Biden who himself cozied up to dictators in Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, Egypt. In fact, Biden, as vice president, refused to call Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak a dictator, even in the midst of the Arab Spring, at the very moment Mubarak's security forces were attacking protesters.
I would not refer to him as a dictator.
Wow. Then there's Michael Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg, whose campaign launched a thread making up quotes from Bernie praising dictators, and even a hashtag, since deleted, called Bernie on Despots. Yes, the same Michael Bloomberg, seen here yakking it up with his special guest, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, in a New York Starbucks, is now giving lectures on standing up to despots and dictators.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. But Intercept will have the full video, theintercept.com, or just search The Intercept and Mehdi Hasan, maybe you'll find it. But this is the kind of video you want to share with friends and family that are, you know, maybe especially if you're in Florida, you have a lot of family members that may be, I don't know, just a little on the misinformed side. Or even if they're not misinformed, I don't want to go down this path when it comes to Cuba and Florida. But a lot of the people that escaped Cuba were the incredibly wealthy Cubans, and they're going to have a particular worldview that is going to be anti, Castro regardless. And you can still acknowledge, there's certain people, you can acknowledge the bad and the good when it comes to people like that. But the idea that Sanders is like pro-authoritarian, when you've seen right here with what Mehdi Hasan is showing when it comes to who Joe Biden has supported, who Bloomberg has supported, like it's just a ridiculous attack line that doesn't make any sense. All right. Okay. Let me show this ad from Jessica Cisneros, because there's several. Let me just intro this. So there are a number of incredible people running in races on Super Tuesday, and not just Bernie Sanders, but down ballot races as well, primary challengers to several sitting Democrats. One of them I want to focus on here is Jessica Cisneros. So she's running in Texas' 28th district against Henry Cuellar, who is known as Trump's favorite Democrat. Voted with Trump 69% of the time, has, I believe, given money to Republicans, has supported Republicans, and is anti-choice, is pro-NRA. I mean, this guy is horrible, and he's not in like a deep red district. No, he's in a very favorable blue district, and he still has these horrible pro-Trump positions. So I want to show you Jessica Cisneros' ad here. She has a new ad out, and this is it gives you the idea of what she's about, and by contrast, what Henry Cuellar is about.
You hear a lot about our community on TV.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
Politicians attacking our families to distract from their greed. You hear about us, but you never really hear from us. We're the proud sons and daughters of immigrants, farm workers, truckers, rancheros, and teachers. We play basketball and loteria. We're the border. Somos los fronterizos. My parents came from Mexico. My dad's a truck driver. My mom takes care of our house. They sacrificed everything for me and my sister and taught me the value of hard work and familia. As a lawyer, I fought for families like mine against Trump's cruel immigration policies. I never saw myself running for Congress at 26, but we need someone who is going to stand up for us, against Trump's hatred. The people of South Texas deserve a representative who's going to fight us hard for our dreams as we do. Henry Cuellar does not fight for us. He's Trump's favorite Democrat. He voted with Republicans to stop DACA, to defund Planned Parenthood, and to fund Trump's wall. He's taken thousands of dollars from private prisons, big oil, the NRA, and the Kochs. He cares more about their money than our dreams. But we're building a movement that is big enough to overcome them. A movement that values the dreams of teachers and truck drivers more than the dollars of big corporate donors. A movement that will bring healthcare through Medicare for all and jobs through a Green New Deal. I'm not taking a dime of corporate PAC money so I can fight for families like yours and mine. This is a fight for true representation, and it's going to take all of us. My name is Jessica Cisneros. Now let's go make history on March 3rd.
So that is just, that's awesome. Jessica Cisneros is endorsed by AOC, by Elizabeth Warren, and by Bernie Sanders. Guess who is supporting Henry Cuellar? Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is backing a pro-Trump, pro-NRA, anti-choice Democrat over Jessica Cisneros. If you are in that district, good God, make sure you go out and vote. You should already be helping Jessica Cisneros, door knocking for her, donating to her. Donate regardless of where you are in the country. But door knock for her, phone bank. Make sure you help Jessica Cisneros win this race. It would be incredible to have another AOC-like figure in Congress and have it in a district where right now you have a horrible sitting Democrat that can absolutely be taken over, and you can finally have a district that is represented by someone that actually cares about real people and these issues. So support Jessica Cisneros. Let me see if we can find her website here. So JessicaCisnerosForCongress.com. Go there. Boom. Takes you to Act Blue. Jessica Cisneros. Just look it up. You will find it. And support Jessica in this race, and hopefully she wins. All right. What do I got? I think we're almost done here. I just want to show one clip here, one more clip, and then we'll do polls of the week. Actually, I don't have tweets of the week this week, but there are a lot of polls to go through. We'll get to that in a second. But I want to show this first. So Anand Giridharadas was on MSNBC with Lawrence O'Donnell, where he basically destroyed Michael Bloomberg's entire argument for president. So I want to show you this clip. It's a quick 2-minute clip, and it really just goes at the heart of why Michael Bloomberg in the race is such an issue.
If I could ask one debate question, it would be this. Raise your hand if you would want there to be more billionaires at the end of your presidency than the start.
You know, I think we are, as I described in that piece, in the middle of what I call the great billionaire referendum.
Yes.
It's hard to think about an election that has been so focused in so many different ways on this question of the billionaire in American life, on extreme wealth in a democracy. And that is partly because you got 2 billionaires running. Then in Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, you have 2 candidates whose entire focus is bringing billionaires down a peg. You have billionaires as the most important financiers of all the candidates who are not those 4 I just described. All the platforms we're discussing this election on are owned by billionaires. We are having a real conversation about, would you actually want there to be fewer of these people for justice to be done in America, and to have essentially more of that money taken through wealth taxes, income taxes, capital gains taxes, profit trimming regulations, minimum wage? Michael Bloomberg has made the argument that not having to court other billionaires makes him less corrupt, makes him actually incorruptible. One guy accountable to nobody, whose whims in his bathrobe in the morning decide his ideas, his policies, who he surrounds himself. His bathrobe whims become the governing framework of the United States, potentially. That, to me, is way more dangerous than someone who, in the fallen world, at least has to deal with the shifting moods and taboos and sensibilities and interests of 10 different rich guys. Every single vote Michael Bloomberg hopes to get is because of spending money on ads. In other words, the enterprise of the Bloomberg campaign, not some side activity of it, the enterprise of it as a whole is corrupt. Attempting to pursue the President of the United States entirely by spending money without doing any of the things all the other candidates have done to actually relate to people, connect with people.
I see. It removes you from the rest of the process.
And buying it with no other basis. He has no support. He had no support until he started spending this money. He knows it. His people know it. Just thinking, this is now a consumer product. The President of the United States becomes a thing people just think they can buy.
He's exactly right. This idea that Bloomberg is, uncorruptible because he's self-funded, that makes him the most corrupt because he doesn't have to answer to anybody, not even other rich people. Just got to answer to himself. He gets to decide what he wants to decide, and he doesn't have to answer to anybody. How is that better? That one person out of 300 million people gets to decide what life is like for the other 200 or for the other 300 million, essentially. I mean, it is just it's nuts. And I'm a little less worried about Bloomberg now than maybe I was before the debates. Clearly, he did not do well in those debates, especially the first one. And since then, it appears his support has kind of stagnated. He hasn't really grown much since those debates. So it's anyone's guess as to how much support he will actually get when we get, into voting into Super Tuesday. He's not running in South Carolina, so he hasn't been on the ballot at all in the first 4 states. But on Super Tuesday, he is going to be on the ballot. And that's when we're going to see how strong his support really is. Because I'm willing to bet that Bloomberg's support is incredibly soft, because 99% of it is based off of television ads or internet ads or radio ads. It's not based on any real attachment to the candidate. A lot of people just now know who Bloomberg is because they keep seeing his ads on television. But the moment they would see a clip of him in that debate or hear something that they don't like about him, then that support goes away and goes somebody else. So I think Bloomberg's support is incredibly soft. I can't imagine he's going to do all that well on Super Tuesday. I forget when Florida votes, but he's apparently leading in Florida right now. I want to see if that holds. Florida is just like its own friggin' place. I don't know how he leads anywhere, but he leads in Florida right now. But apart from Florida, I can't imagine Bloomberg making much of a dent at this point. He would be the worst candidate. And I've complained endlessly about Joe Biden, about the other candidates, Pete Buttigieg, another horrible candidate. But Michael Bloomberg is easily the worst because of how he has purchased his support, how he doesn't have any actual real support, and his history, his policy history dating back to his time as mayor of New York City. Michael Bloomberg is garbage. And the more people see that, whether it's through, I'm even seeing some cable news cover him properly. I've seen Ben Dixon on MSNBC now, I think at least a couple of times, discussing Michael Bloomberg and how horrible he is. Like, the more that voters are exposed to who Michael Bloomberg is and his horrible record, that support's going to drop. So he no longer can just rely on his television ads because he's actually being discussed. He was actually in a debate, and his history, his records actually being scrutinized finally. And people are seeing it, and you're not seeing Bloomberg grow. You're really only seeing him stagnate or go down. Okay. Let me, what should I do? Let me do all the polls first. Let me do all the polls. So many friggin' polls. All right, every week I collect a bunch of polls of how the race is going. And there's a lot this week, so let's go through it. Let me start first. What do I got up here? This is a national Reuters Ipsos poll. So you got Sanders here, 26% in the lead. Bloomberg at 15%. Interesting to see Bloomberg tied with second with Joe Biden. Warren at 10%, Buttigieg at 10%, Klobuchar 4%, Steyer 3%. So Bernie's looking good there. I think this is that same poll, but now broken down by black voters. So Sanders leading with black voters in this national poll. 26%, Biden at 23, Bloomberg at 20. Also, same poll, but another aspect of it. Who is the best candidate on healthcare? Sanders, 33%, leading. Biden, Bloomberg tied for second at 14. Environment, Sanders leading, 27%. Second, Bloomberg at 12. Immigration, Sanders leading, 21%. Biden second at 16. Warren at 12. So Sanders looking really good nationally there. Let's check out this Harris X poll, National Harris X poll, post Nevada. Sanders is a +6 since the Nevada results in this Harris X poll. He's now at 28%, leading by 9 points over Bloomberg. Bloomberg's only up 1. He's at 19. Biden's down 2 at 17, and everyone else is under 15%. Let's look at YouGov. National Economist YouGov poll. Sanders is 10 points ahead of Joe Biden. He's +5. Biden's a +1 in this poll, but he's still 10 points down. And Warren is at 16, and Bloomberg's at 11. Let's check South Carolina. This is a Change Polls, Post and Courier poll. South Carolina, Biden. So I have to be completely honest here. This is the closest poll that in terms of Sanders' position here, compared to any other poll. So 4 points right now is the best separation that Sanders has in South Carolina. Every other poll shows Biden up by 10 points, up by 20 points, may even be up by 25 points in a poll or two. So very likely Sanders will lose South Carolina. That said, if you're in South Carolina, don't give up. I mean, continue your on-the-ground work. But it's not looking great right now in South Carolina. And a lot of it, voters skew a little older in South Carolina. It's definitely a harder spot for Bernie Sanders. But like this would be, I think, a good result. If Sanders got 24% and Biden got 28%, I'd be happy with that because a lot of the other polling is not looking too good right now. But that's the Change Polls poll. Let's check Texas. So Texas early voting counts. So this is so early vote right now in Texas is up. Up considerably. Damn. Up by 100,000. So 2016 it was 170,000 by this point, and 2020 271,000. Turnout increase 63%, looking really good right now in Texas. The higher the voter turnout, the better it is for Sanders, because it means a lot of new voters coming out, a lot of young people coming out, a lot of working class voters coming out, a lot of independents potentially. I'm not sure if Texas is a close state or not, I forget, but higher turnout in general is better for Bernie Sanders. This is a Univision News, University of Houston, Texas poll. Sanders leading here by 6 points over Joe Biden. So before this, Sanders was either a little below or tied with Joe Biden in Texas. Right now, he is leading by 6 points, 26 to Biden at 20. Bloomberg's also at 20. And this was from today. So this is a new poll. Looking really good right now in Texas. This is California and Texas. This is a CNN SSRS poll. So California, he's at 35. Everyone else under 15. So when it comes to pledged delegates, this is a great position to be in because you need to hit 15% to be able to get delegates in the state. Though there are also statewide delegates. So you can win by, if you have over 15% by district or by precinct, I forget which it is, you do get some delegates, but statewide, looking here, Warren wouldn't get any, and Sanders would have all of California. That would be just dominating. If he's able to dominate California like this and win Texas, as he is in this poll with 9 points, at that point, the race is basically over. If you win Texas and California with margins like this, what's the argument against this candidate? Good luck finding one. So, I mean, this would be a fantastic result if Sanders can be able to have this kind of win in Texas by 9 points. Let's look at More California. So this is change polls. Sanders at 36. He's a +6. Warren's at 18%, a +2. Again, still a big lead here, even though Warren's over 15. Looking really good for Sanders. And he's up 6 since last month. So the candidate with the highest increase in support. Point Blank Political. This is also California. Sanders 34. Warren 13. So you can wow. So you can see the results are kind of all over the place here, but there is a consistent theme of Sanders doing very well and the other candidates barely making 15%. And here they're not making it at all. So this would be an incredible win for Sanders if that was the result. Did I do this one? No. This may have been in the earlier one. I forget now. But Sanders 35, 14 for Warren here in California. Let's look at Pennsylvania. So this is head-to-head against Trump. Sanders, the only one here beating Donald Trump. He's a +3 over Trump in Pennsylvania, an incredibly important state if you want to be able to win. Again, it's not just about, national polls. In fact, national polls really don't matter all that much. It's state by state in these swing states. Can your candidate win them? Sanders right now, the only candidate that can in Pennsylvania. Trump is tied with Biden here. Trump is tied with Warren. Trump is over beating Klobuchar by 1. Trump beating Buttigieg by 1. And Trump beating Bloomberg by 3. Bloomberg would be the worst candidate, as I've said a million times. Wisconsin. This is a Marquette poll. Sanders is up in Wisconsin, up 10. Bloomberg's up 11. Let's hope the debate will impact this a little bit. But still, Sanders with a big, comfortable lead here, over 10 points over Bloomberg. And Biden's at down 8 at 15%. Wisconsin head-to-head. Again, Sanders the only one beating Trump in Wisconsin. Another important state if you want to become president, if you want Democrats to win. Sanders, +2 over Trump. Trump ties with Biden. Trump ties with Klobuchar. Ties with Buttigieg. +1 over Bloomberg. +3 over Warren. Very interesting there. Let's check out Massachusetts. Here we got, it's a Mass Inc. poll. Sanders is 25%, up 12. Bloomberg is +13, but it appears this is his first time in this poll, so he's just at 13%. I wouldn't really say it's a +13, but he debuts at 13%. Sanders with a big jump here, and in the lead. Warren down 15%. So we're talking, this is Warren State. This is Warren State, and Sanders is almost beating her by 10 points. It's looking really good, guys. It's looking really good. Let's hope this continues. What else do we got here? Rust Belt. This is the Rust Belt on average. So I showed this in a different segment, but let me just revisit it here. Real Clear Politics polling averages. Sanders beats Trump in all of these states except for Wisconsin, where nobody right now is beating Trump, except for that poll I showed you earlier where Sanders is beating him by 2 points. It's possible that poll is not in this one because I think this was done earlier, but this is the polling averages. Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Sanders beats Trump in all of them. In Wisconsin, they're tied. But maybe if that new poll where Sanders is up by 2 points in Wisconsin over Trump, maybe if that's added, then he would be winning it. What else we got here? I think this is just breaking down. Did I show this already? I forget. Pennsylvania, though. Yeah, I think I showed this. Winning that. I already showed that. This is important for talking about, ceilings. Oh, Bernie has a ceiling. He has a very low ceiling. Right now, more voters are considering Bernie Sanders than any other candidate, and that's by 11 points here. So Sanders at 49, Biden 38, Warren 38, Buttigieg 24. Gabbard the lowest with 5% because, honestly, I think a lot of people don't even know she's still in the race. I often forget that myself. One more point for electability here. So this is an ABC News poll. Based on what you saw in the debates in this past week, which candidate do you think has the best chance of defeating Donald Trump in November? Bernie Sanders with a 9-point lead over Joe Biden. This is awesome. This is what you want to see, because for a while, a lot of people were convinced because of the misinformation on cable news that, oh, Joe Biden is the most electable candidate. But then they begin to see Bernie winning states. And then maybe they pay a little more attention to his performance in the debates and think, oh, wait, this guy's actually really good, because he's able to attract a large voter turnout because he speaks to a lot of people that don't normally vote. So I think people are beginning to get that message now and are seeing that Sanders would be the best to go up against Trump. This one, do you think the candidate's performance in the debate, do you think the candidate's performances in the debates in the past week have, strengthen the Democratic chances of defeating Trump? This even really matters. Let's just skip that. In helping you decide who to vote for in 2020 Democratic primaries, would you say that the debates in the past week were somewhat useful? That makes sense. Not so useful, not useful at all. So it appears that people are finding the debates useful, at least somewhat useful, which I think is good because Bernie has had a fairly good performance in them. I think that's it for here. All right, look at that. So it's looking pretty good on Super Tuesday for Sanders, but anything can change, which is why you gotta always be fighting. Even if it's something as simple as talking with friends and family and getting people who normally aren't politically engaged, getting them engaged in politics, and even listening to their issues, ask them what they care about. What do they want from a candidate, or what issues do they worry about in their lives? Maybe it's low wages, maybe it's student debt, maybe it's healthcare. Be able to relate with people on their issue and then discuss why you think Sanders would be the best candidate. And all you really got to do is look at his platform and his history of fighting for those various issues. And in almost every case, you can find a clip of Bernie talking about that issue, whatever issue it is, 20 years ago. So you show something like that, I think it's fairly convincing which candidate in the race will actually fight for people when Sanders has been fighting for them for 40 years. All right, that's it. Let me clean up the rest of the super chats if I got any more. And then I'll be out of here. So send your chats in now if you want something, because there's about a minute delay, so I may not get to everybody if you're late. So make sure you get it in now. All right. Citizen Zero says, my parents live in Bolivia and I was there 5 months ago. I'll agree Evo did good for the country, but he wanted to be a dictator. Even in La Paz, anti-Evo graffiti abounded. The people wanted him gone. Well, it turns out they didn't, because they voted for him in the last election, according to the results. Zachary Fluke says, we vote in Florida on March 17th. I can attest to how badly he's flooded our airwaves here. He's on every other commercial. A lot of old people here. That is the worry with Florida. Heavily, an aged population. That is not Sanders' strength. And let's just be honest. It's because a lot of, again, not all, but a lot of the older generation voters get their information from sources like MSNBC. How much are you going to learn when all that information is going out on that network constantly? So, yeah, that's the one fight he has, is voters over, especially over 65, is the real issue. I think even in Nevada, Sanders won every demographic except for 65 plus aged voters, but he won everything else, and he won that race by 26 points. Sally Shaw says, it's frustrating to think of all the good Bloomberg could have done with the money he has spent on campaign ads. I know. It is very, very infuriating to think about that. He has tons of money, and what does he do? Spend it on himself. And for that matter, Tom Steyer as well. Clearly Bloomberg has spent a lot more, but also Bloomberg has a lot more money than Steyer does, even though they're both billionaires. There is, I guess, a difference between 60 billion and 1 billion. But the amount of money that could have been poured into anything else, it's just it's really sad. All right, about to get out of here. Look at that. 2 hours and 12 minutes. One of my more concise streams, believe it or not. Sometimes I've gone almost 4 hours at points. But I think we're good here, unless someone comes in late. But thank you all for coming. Again, I will be on Twitch. Link is below the video in the description box, twitch.tv/TheRationalNational. I'll be streaming there for the South Carolina primary because I'll be watching MSNBC, CNN, maybe even Fox News if they're covering it. I like to get a feel of like what their coverage is like, what people are being, brainwashed by. So I like to see that. I may even check out TYT and their coverage. I think they're going to be covering it too. So I may jump around just to see what everyone's saying. But come hang out. Twitch is a lot more laid back. A lot. I would say, yeah, a lot more laid back. I'll likely be drinking. I'll be intoxicated in some way, I'm sure. So come check that out. Hopefully Sanders does well in South Carolina. Cross your fingers. We will see. But thank you all for coming, and see you tomorrow.